When we hear the word Celts, images of warriors with painted bodies, wise Druids mysteriously whispering their spells in dense forests, and proud chieftains fighting against the legions of Rome come to mind. The Celtic heritage still lives on in the culture, language, and traditions of millions of people around the world. But who were these mysterious Celts really? Where did they come from, and how did they spread across Europe? Welcome to our journey back through the centuries to the origins of one of the oldest and most influential civilizations of Europe. Let me remind you, you're on the Amazing History channel, a channel for those who truly love history. And today I will continue the series of episodes dedicated to ancient peoples. Before I continue, please don't forget to support the channel through sponsorship on YouTube or Patreon. We would also appreciate your likes, subscriptions, and of course, your kind comments. Let's get to today's topic. Our knowledge about the ancient Celts is quite limited. They left almost no written sources of their own, so most of the information about them comes from archaeological finds and the study of their languages. In addition, some information has come down to us from Greek and Roman texts, which wrote about the Celts from their own point of view. However, both types of sources represent only a fragment of history, a mosaic of the Celtic world. Despite this, it is with such scattered and incomplete information that we have to work in order to at least partially reconstruct the image of this mysterious civilization. One of the key stages in the history of the Celts is considered to be the Hallstatt culture, named after the town of Hallstatt, located on the shore of a lake in the Austrian Alps. It was here, in the mid-19th century, that a large burial ground of an ancient salt mining settlement was discovered. The artifacts that were found revealed to the world a material culture that archaeologists later recognized as one of the cradles of the early Celts. Later, the Hallstatt culture was divided into four periods, Hallstatt A and B, which belonged to the late Bronze Age. The foundation of their economy was the extraction of salt, as well as copper and tin, which were used for making bronze and for trade. The burials from this period were relatively modest, without a clearly defined status. Hallstatt C. The early Iron Age was marked by the emergence of a social hierarchy of chiefs, warriors, and craftsmen. This period is characterized by the appearance of rich barrow burials. Chiefs were buried with weapons, jewelry, and even chariots, which emphasized their high status. Archaeologists have discovered items made of bronze, iron, gold, as well as imported goods such as amber and ivory. This indicates the extensive trade connections of the Hallstatt society. Horses and chariots held a special place, probably borrowed from nomadic peoples such as the Cimmerians. Horses not only served as a symbol of power, but were also used in cavalry battles, as evidenced by the discovery of thrusting swords that were perfectly suited for riders. Hallstatt D. During this period, the culture shifted westward, closer to the Danube, Rhine, and the north. The north, where trade with Greek and Phoenician colonies such as Massalia, modern-day Marseille, became more active. Wine, glass, and ceramics from the Mediterranean became important trade and luxury items in Celtic society. The first written mention of the Celts is found in the works of the Greek historian Hecataeus of Miletus around 517 BC, who referred to the people living beyond Massalia as Celts. Importantly, this name is either connected to the tribe's own name or to the Greek word meaning tall, which reinforced the stereotype of the Celts as physically tall people. By 500 BC, the Hallstatt culture had reached its peak. Tribal chiefs concentrated significant resources in their hands thanks to control over trade routes that connected Central Europe with the more developed cultures of Greece and Italy. Small fortifications began to be replaced by large settlements, such as the Hüneberg complex in the south of modern Germany. The burials of the tribal elite became increasingly luxurious. The burial mounds contained Greek and Etruscan artifacts, weapons, jewelry, as well as items from distant regions, including the Baltic and North Africa. Thus, the Hallstatt culture laid the foundation for the formation of classical Celtic society, which later spread througght Europe. Returning to the development of these cultures, however, not all the peoples who lived in the territory of the Hallstatt culture were speakers of the Celtic language. Just as not all early Celtic peoples used the material culture of Hallstatt. For example, by the 5th century BC, Celtic languages spread to Ireland and the Iberian Peninsula, but there they mixed with local traditions, which led to the formation of unique cultures such as Celtiberian and Gaelic, which had almost no cultural continuity with Hallstatt. Simply put, the Hallstatt culture was an important stage in the formation of the Celts, but not all of its representatives were Celts, and not all Celts followed this culture. By the middle of the 5th century BC, the power and wealth of the Hallstatt culture began to decline. The reasons for this were complex and multifactorial. First of all, the system of international trade was changing. Traditional ties with Greek cities such as Massalia became less important as the Greeks began to look for new trade routes and partners, and the Etruscans shifted their economic interests further away from the Hallstatt region. As a result, the center of the Hallstatt culture moved further north and west, marking the beginning of a new era of the Tène culture, named after the Swiss settlement of Tène. The Tène culture became a continuation and development of the Hallstatt traditions, but was distinguished by its dynamism and a wider territorial reach. Its main centers were located in the valleys of the Moselle and Marne rivers, but soon its influence spread to most of Europe. Tène art became a symbol of Celtic aesthetics. Weapons, armor, vessels, and jewelry were distinguished by characteristic spiral patterns, as well as plant and animal motifs. It was during this period that we moved from analyzing archaeological finds to the first written mentions of the Celts in Greek and Roman sources. Although ancient authors were often unknown, their descriptions provide important information about the language, politics, religion, and everyday life of the Celts. One of the widely known names for the Tène Celts was the Gauls. This term was used by the Romans to refer to the Celts they encountered in northern Italy. The name Gaul could have originated from the ethnonym of one of the tribes or been adapted from the Germanic word Walhaz, meaning foreigner, which the ancient Germanic peoples used to refer to the Celts. There is a misconception that the Tène Celts or Gauls were a single ethnic and cultural group. In reality, they never formed a unified nation. The Celtic world was extremely diverse, and different tribes had their own identities, dialects, religious traditions, and forms of political organization. Although archaeological and linguistic evidence shows that they had common features, Celtic culture remained fragmented and regionally specific. During the peak of the Tène culture, Celtic languages began to differ greatly. They split into two main groups: P-Celtic languages, which were spoken in continental Europe and Britain, such as ancient Gaulish and Brittonic languages, and Q-Celtic languages, which were more archaic and spoken among the Gaels in Ireland and probably the Celtiberians in Spain. Old Irish belongs to this group. This split has persisted to the present day. Modern Welsh and Irish languages are not mutually intelligible. During the Tène period, speakers of these languages most likely did not consider themselves part of a single group, which we know mainly thanks to Roman records. We know that during the late Iron Age, there were such well-known tribes as G phenomenon. In continental Europe and in Europe, also in Britain, there are cultures represented. Some names have survived to this day, for example the Belgi, who gave their name to modern Belgium, or the Parisi, after whom the city of Paris is named. Despite political fragmentation, the Celts of the Tène period retained such common features as tribal hierarchy. For example, among the Gauls, the main unit of social life was the tribe, which was headed by a hereditary chief. His authority extended over administrative districts called pagi. Under the chief's command was the military aristocracy, the elite who supported his authority and protected the tribe. Next came the craftsmen and specialists, mainly in metallurgy, who provided the tribe with weapons and tools. And the majority of the population were farmers, about 90%, who supplied the chief and the warriors with food. The Celts were masters of agricultural technology. They used a plow with an iron plowshare, which allowed them to work heavy soils. The main agricultural crops were wheat, barley, oats, beans, and peas. Animal husbandry included raising sheep, pigs, and cattle. Most Celts lived in small rural communities. The dwellings of the Gauls were rectangular, built from wood, wattle, and clay, which provided thermal insulation. In Britain, Ireland, and northern Spain, houses were mostly round and built from stone. The buildings of the nobility and ordinary farmers did not differ much in construction, but the houses of the aristocracy were larger and could include banquet halls for gatherings and celebrations. Greek and Roman authors, as well as sculptors, created a romanticized image of the Gaul as a tall, red-haired warrior with impressive mustaches who fought with fearsome symbols painted on him. This image embodied the idea of the noble savage, brave but rough. However, the reality was less impressive. The average Gallic man was about the same height as a Roman or a Greek. Despite the stereotypes of savagery, the Gauls paid significant attention to personal hygiene and appearance. Some sources suggest that they removed body hair to maintain cleanliness and a well-groomed appearance. Nevertheless, one of the most notable elements of their appearance was their thick mustaches, which played an important role in men's appearance and were considered a symbol of masculinity. There is a suggestion that Gallic warriors treated their hair with slaked lime, which gave it a light, almost white shade. And it allowed them to style their hair into stiff, spike-like strands, which enhanced their intimidating appearance on the battlefield. As for fashion, the Gauls dressed in a practical and relatively conservative manner, although clothing varied by region. Men usually wore long-sleeved tunics and baggy trousers woven from linen and wool. Women typically wore long dresses. Both men and women used cloaks or capes decorated with distinctive checkered patterns, which they made using natural dyes from plants, berries, and other natural ingredients. To obtain bright colors, such as blue or green, complex processes were used that involved organic materials like urine, which reacted chemically with the dyes. Tattoos and painted bodies, often attributed to the Gauls, were actually characteristic of the inhabitants of Britain and northwestern Europe. The British tribes used blue paint made from the woad plant, which gave their skin a bluish tint. This paint was considered a magical talisman and was used in rituals before battles. And finally, a little about the beliefs of the Celts. Celtic religion was complex, diverse, and closely intertwined with the social, political, and cultural life of the ancient tribes. Modern ideas about Celtic beliefs are often distorted. Some see them as an example of harmony with nature and a cult dedicated to the forces of the earth. Others see them as savages who sacrificed people to their gods. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between these extremes. Celtic religion did not have a single pantheon like the Greek or Roman ones. Instead, each region, and sometimes even each tribe, had its own gods and spirits associated with specific places, rivers, mountains, forests, or even individual trees. In total, about 400 deities are known, most of which were local and worshipped only in limited regions. However, a few gods gained recognition throughout the Celtic world. These include the god of thunder and lightning, Taranis, the god of youth and fertility, Maponos, the solar deity, Belen, the horned god of nature and animals, Cernunnos, the goddess of horses, Epona, and the protector of tribes, Teutatis, who was associated with war and sacrifices. Druids played a key role in the religious life of the Celts as priests, philosophers, judges, and teachers. They are often depicted as mysterious, long-bearded elders in white robes. They possessed enormous influence that extended far beyond religion. Druids often acted as advisors to chiefs, mediators in negotiations between tribes, and peacemakers. They settled disputes, delivered judicial verdicts, and acted as arbitrators in tribal conflicts. Druids educated the youth, passing on knowledge about laws, legends, astronomy, medicine, and religious rituals. If you wanted to become a Druid, it would take you up to 20 years of training, during which you would have to memorize a lot of religious and scientific information. And yes, Druids did not write down their knowledge, preferring oral traditions, which makes their teachings largely inaccessible to modern historians. And unfortunately, there is no historical evidence about magical potions that grant superhuman strength to those who drink them. Every year, Druids gathered in the sacred forests of the Carnutes to discuss important political and religious matters. This gathering symbolized unity among the scattered Celtic tribes and served as a kind of coordinating center for the Order of Druids. One of the main duties of a Druid was to perform sacrifices to the gods. We get information about sacrifices from the works of authors such as Julius Caesar, Lucan, and Diodorus Siculus. Different gods required different types of sacrifices. For example, the victims of Teutates were drowned in a vat of water, while for Tyrannus, the unfortunate ones were simply beheaded or burned alive in a huge straw effigy, the so-called wicker man. Diodorus also says that human sacrifices were made as a way to predict the future by observing the convulsions of the dying person or the condition of their internal organs. However, it should be noted that many Roman accounts were aimed at discrediting the Celts as barbarians and justifying their conquest. If you want to see more content on Celtic culture, let me know in the comments. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you next time.